Welcome back to Anxiety Slayer. I'm Shann, and today I'm speaking with Kristina Mand-Lakhiani about personal transformation, authenticity, understanding and accepting yourself, and a path to happiness during these interesting times on planet Earth. Welcome to Anxiety Slayer, Kristina.
Thank you, Shann, for having me here on this podcast.
It's wonderful to be with you. And before we begin, I do want to share a little bit about your background. Kristina is the co-founder of international publishing giant Mindvalley and the creator of the 7 Days to Happiness program. As someone who faced the 2020 lockdown as a newly single woman after 17 years of marriage, Kristina has a unique insight on hacking happiness and rediscovering her energy and enthusiasm. Welcome, welcome. It's so good to have you here, and I look forward to diving into our conversation.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it as well.
I read that you believe life is far too important to be taken seriously. And that was how I knew immediately that I liked you, because I have been far too serious most of my life, and only in the last 10 years or so have I learned to bring more fun into my roles. How do you bring more fun into your roles as a mother, teacher, entrepreneur, and world traveler?
You know, it's such an interesting place to start with. I have to be fair, it's not my quote, it's actually Oscar Wilde who said so, and he's one wise man when it comes to life. In my case, I would answer probably a little bit unusually. I think that when things happen to us in life, especially when very intense things happen to us in life, then I like to say that in the worst case scenario, there are two remedies: being philosophical about what happened, or if it is incredibly intense, then just having fun about it. I actually learned it from one very old fable I heard somewhere. I don't even remember where I heard it, but it was about this Mongolian king besieging a city and trying to take it, and sending his army to go and loot and take whatever there is in the city. And then the army comes back and reports to the king that we have taken everything that the people had. And the king asks, "So what are the people doing?" And the army says, "Oh, they're crying and begging us for mercy." And the king says, "You have to go back." So a few rounds like that keep going, and the army starts, well, they steal literally everything: food, whatever is there. So after a few rounds, the army comes back, and the king asks, "So what are the people in the city doing?" And the army says, "Oh, they're laughing and joking, and seems like they're having fun." And then the king says, "I guess there's nothing left." So I actually truly believe that joking and philosophy are the two things which help when things are really, really miserable.
And it's true, because when we can find humor in what it is we're walking through, what it is we're experiencing, everything shifts. We become almost like a lightness of being in the midst of some very difficult experiences.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, sometimes we can't change things, but at least we can feel a little better about whatever we have. I like all sorts of quotes, and I'm a bit of a geek, but I think it's Gandalf who told Frodo that, you know, we don't always get to choose the times when we're living, but we get to choose what we do with those times. So I
Mm.
think this approach about having fun or being philosophical about what life throws at you, it helps you just try to get the better out of whatever you have been dealt, because we don't
Right.
always get to choose.
One of the questions I like to ask is, what is right about this that I'm not getting? Or what's the beautiful energy underneath this that I'm not seeing or experiencing yet?
True. Yes. You know, on the other hand, I'm not a huge fan of the saying that whatever happens is for the better, because it's not necessarily so. I really think that, well, life is a sequence of events which happen either to you or through you or around you. And they're just events. How they're going to affect your life is pretty much very often a choice which you get to make if you have
Mhm.
the capacity and the right framework. So while not everything that happens may be to your advantage or may be better for you, because we have to be objective. And, you know, for example, my mom lost her sister to COVID last year. And objectively, you know, when you're losing someone dear, there is nothing, there may be no silver lining to that. But whatever happens to you in your life, you can ask yourself, is it going to be your curse or your blessing? And
Yes.
very often, the very sad events, or let's say the events which create grief in you, while they are definitely not a blessing, they're definitely not a turn for the better, and maybe they're not for the better for you, but at least they're the moment for you to slow down and remind yourself that you've had meaningful love in your life. You know, you've had connections and relations, someone in your life for a long time who mattered so much. So while it's not a pleasurable event, it's still an event to remind you of the good things that have been there.
Oh, yeah, because you're busting your heart wide open
Yes.
in the grief, in the love, in the memory of this person that you spent so much of your time with, and condolences to you and to your mama.
Thank you.
Tell us about your unique framework for happiness and how you walked your talk and implemented this framework after your divorce and during lockdown.
So, yes, I started teaching about happiness a little before all of that happened. But during lockdown, I found this wonderful anonymous internet quote that says, happy are those who are on a detour and can still enjoy the scenery. And it really struck the chord. I've always, when I taught about happiness, I always taught about it in a way where I'm very clear and open and honest that no matter how much I teach, your life is going to be to be both good and bad. It's not like you do your homework, you do your transformation, and then it's all smooth sailing. One of my favorite TED speakers and PhD in philosophy, Susan David, she says, "Pain is the price of admission to meaningful life." So my framework of happiness is based on a slightly older theory of hedonic adaptation, which essentially says that we all have a set point of happiness. So
Mhm.
it's this general feeling that we carry through life. And if things happen to us, whether they're good or bad, they throw us off that set point. And like thermostat brings the temperature in the room back to the set temperature. So our set point, or hedonic adaptation theory says so, brings us back to that general state which we normally feel in life when life is not intensely good or intensely bad to us. So my theory about happiness is that rather than dealing with the immediate emotions, which are changing and volatile by nature, you have to really deal with that set point of happiness. And surprisingly, psychology actually doesn't say how to lift the set point of happiness, which is so strange. We seem to be much more devout to such states as depression because we understand that depression is a kind of state. When it comes to happiness, almost everybody writes it off as an emotion.
Mm.
So the opposite, well, I wouldn't call happiness exactly the opposite of depression, but let's say a state that many of us would be aspiring for. We, in psychology, we don't recognize it as a state. We think it is an emotion, and as an emotion, obviously, it is not going to stay. So that's why we hear those talks about don't chase happiness, then you are not going to get it. You know, happiness is elusive. Of course, if it is an emotion, it's going to be elusive. I guess the most important part about me teaching happiness is that I take it as a state. And because I take it as a state, then the things that I suggest that people do to lift their set point of happiness have not much to do with their immediate emotions and have more to do with a further outlook. So, for example, if you wake up in the morning and you don't feel very well and you want to cheer up, then there are little things that can make you feel better. But they're not going to solve the underlying problem why you're not feeling very well. Or, for example, why you're feeling anxious. So these kind of methods that we often use to make ourselves feel better, I call them instant gratification techniques. They make us feel better right now, but they don't necessarily make us feel better in the long run. So when I talk about happiness, I suggest that people look into more long-term strategies, things that might not make you feel ecstatic in the moment, but if you practice them for a long time, that actually lifts your set points of happiness.
Hmm. I get that. That makes sense to me. You say that we're 100% responsible for our own happiness. And I agree, we are. It's choice, right? What can our listeners do if they're feeling so incredibly anxious and sideways, and that they've decided that that anxiety is keeping them from their joy, keeping them
Mhm.
from that choice to be happy?
Well, I can imagine that being anxious and being happy are not exactly compatible emotions, although some painful emotions are compatible with happiness. But I also have to say that I do not believe in absolutes. And while I might say, or at least this is the common saying, and a lot of people who talk or teach happiness, they say that happiness is in your hands. It is true, generally speaking. And in personal growth, everything starts with taking personal responsibility.
Hmm.
But again, we have to look at the setting. So a simple example from my personal life: when my kid was about 6 or 7 years old, I took him from school. Actually, the nurse called and asked me to take him from school because he was sick. And I remember it was sometime in the midday, like 1 or 2 p.m. He had appendicitis, so by 6 p.m. he was having a surgery. It happened really quickly, and I
Mm.
was, it was unexpected. It was unprepared. So I remember while he was in surgery, I was in the waiting room, and the surgery is supposed to take half an hour, but of course, with all the preparations and everything, it was an excruciating almost 2 hours of me waiting, not knowing what's going on. And in that moment where my most darling little person, helpless, is in the surgery, and I'm out there waiting, not knowing how's it going and why is it going so long, I can tell myself all I want, that happiness is my choice. It's not going to work.
Right.
That's not the place, right?
Right.
So another thing is that that set point of happiness, no matter what life throws at you, you can get back to normal. Just because you are grieving doesn't mean that this is going to be forever. One of my good friends and an amazing, incredible teacher, Shelley Levko, she says, some events, while they matter, the meaning that we give them may be very different. So if I come back to that example of my mom losing her beloved sister, of course it mattered, but it doesn't mean that she will never be happy again.
Right.
It's just that in those moments of extreme grief, it's really hard to think about that. And I would actually argue that we shouldn't force ourselves to think about that, because happiness is, it's not going to run away. We live a long life. You'll get back to that. The important thing is not to go into the extremes. That's why I don't like absolutes.
Hmm.
And I've been in personal growth for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of teachings. I've seen a lot of teachers. I know a lot of doctrines, and I know that we live a little bit in the era of positivity tyranny,
Right.
where we insist that people can't feel anything bad, that we insist that they can't bring their garbage into the society. If you feel down, stay at home and don't poison the rest of the world. This is unhealthy. This is simply unhealthy, because having painful emotions is nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong about being, anxious, about being stressed, even about being angry, about being wrong. There's nothing wrong about that. We are humans. We are here living human experience, and part of human experience is experiencing actually the whole spectrum of emotions. And nothing is wrong about any emotions. You can experience any emotion. The question is, what do you act out of? You can feel anger. It doesn't mean you have to act out of anger. You can feel anger, create some space, and choose to act out of your values, out of what is important to you, out of your personal beliefs, or what is the core essence of you as a human being. So the same goes for depression, sadness, grief, anxiety. When I had my periods of anxiety, because I didn't come to teaching happiness out of nowhere, but I had intense periods of anxiety, which actually made me, like, I couldn't sleep. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and it lasted really long time, for months, in fact, if not years. My healing started when I somewhere read that stress is much more dangerous to your health than the stress itself. Feeling shame or stress because you're feeling anxious. This secondary stress is much more worse than anxiety itself. If you allow all those unpleasant, painful feelings just to be and not beat yourself up for having them, you're halfway into feeling better. And that's why I'm a huge opponent. I do not like uh, uh, you know, being pushy about being happy. If you're not happy, it's fine. It's fine. Breathe, experience it. You know, if you want to work on that, we'll have time. We'll get there.
Right. So back to the prior question, how did you implement this framework and address your own happiness set point, finding yourself alone for the first time in 17 years or outside of your partnership at the same time was of lockdown and this pandemic and all of this. I mean, here you are doing everything that you do and creating what you create in the world, and then you're sitting with this.
Mm. I will have to give a little bit of a background, but first I will say that the thing that helped me through pandemic was the idea that happy are those who are on a detour can still enjoy the scenery. If
Yes.
we are absolutely honest with ourselves, if we take life philosophically, the whole life is one long detour. We think we're going from point A to point B, but if it was really like that, then the life would start at birth and end at death, and it would be a straight line. Wouldn't that be horrible? So our life is a long detour, and the point is to just enjoy whatever you experience, whatever you see. And that was the thing that helped me through pandemic. I just tried to see beauty in the things that I had access to at that point. But now the background that I have to set is that my separation from my husband wasn't really traumatic, and I wasn't feeling alone. Yes, I lost a lover, and excuse me if I'm too direct, but my sex life changed. But in everything else, I didn't lose a friend, I didn't lose a partner, I didn't lose a father of my children, a family member, because we chose to, we chose to dissolve the one part of our relationship which seemed to not work anymore, at least at that point, and preserve or save everything else that did work. That's why I don't feel that I was lonely. We actually did, we moved to Estonia because lockdown in Malaysia was intense, and I used to live in Malaysia. So lockdown caught me in Malaysia. I moved to Europe where we have a lot of nature and very few people. So the lockdown wasn't intense. We were allowed to travel in the country, go to forests and
Hmm.
enjoy the outdoors, and Europe opened up a little earlier. We got to travel, so we even had a whole bunch of family holidays during during pandemic and lockdowns because world wasn't in sync with lockdowns. So I didn't suffer. In fact, this spring I was praying for another lockdown so that social life stops for a while and I get to breathe and maybe
Yeah.
go back to nature a little bit more often.
Yeah,
But
yeah. The blessings that were a part of it for sure.
we
Mm,
pushed through, and here we are in summer.
yeah. Well, and I have great respect for how you and your husband decided to move forward with your lives. And when I think about both of you and your investment in Mind Valley and all that you've been teaching and a part of, it makes sense that that's what you did. And yet at the same time, it feels a bit of a fairy tale when you hear so many of the other kinds of stories. So I have great respect and honor that that is how you chose to move forward.
Yeah, it does sound a little bit like, we had to put an effort into that, but honestly, I do think that inside my heart, that's what I think is the right way to do,
Yes. Yes.
and it has nothing to do with me as a teacher or with Vision being a teacher, because while yeah, it's nice that we get to tell that story, but we are just humans anyway, and
Right.
as far from perfect as can be. And I really don't think that the world needs perfect people.
But what we do need is to respect each other and to honor the choices we made in our relationships up to the point where they dissolved, and to honor that person and to have role models who are doing that and showing us what it's like to consciously change your relationship.
The author who coined that term is Catherine Woodward Thomas. She wrote a book. She wrote several books, but one of them is on conscious and coupling. So she teaches that, and she actually, as a psychotherapist and couples therapist, she helps people to go through that journey, whether they decide to consciously uncouple as a couple, as a former couple, or if, let's say, well, there are a lot of divorces which end up with a person being left alone. You
Yeah.
can do this journey alone as well. In our case, well, we did, of course, do work with Catherine as well. She's a friend and she's a wonderful woman. Uh, I think it is something that I resonate with. And I
Mm.
think we as a society, we dramatize the end of love. And I want to specify that we're talking about end of a romantic love, right? Or
Right,
end of
right,
sexual relationship. I know that in the old days, husband or a wife, well, mostly husband for a woman, was the whole world because we lived in different environment where women didn't have social financial security. They actually needed husbands not so much as fathers to their children or love partners. Well, romance was very far from uh, from marriage in let's say 200 years ago for
sure.
most people. Now we get to choose. So we still take separation so dramatically, where we could actually allow the idea that a relationship doesn't end. Even if you stop communicating with that person, even if you hate that person, relationship doesn't end. The memory of that person, the hate for that person, the avoidance of that person is still a relationship. It's
Right,
just unhealthy relationship. So
right,
my natural choice is to make that relationship, which will continue forever, because he has been such a, and still keeps being such an important part of my life. He's the father of my children, forever will be that.
right.
So this relationship is not ending,
Yeah.
and I choose it to be healthy. That's
I
all.
love that. I love that so much. So let's circle back to our listeners today who listen to this podcast for support when they're feeling anxious, when they're feeling like it might be tough to get out of bed today, but they're going to do it anyway. They're some of the strongest, most creative, incredibly powerful people I've come to know over the years, but they still feel like anxiety keeps them from their daily joy. Do you have any tips to share on how they can improve that set point or something that they might be able to practice that might help them just come away from feeling that stress and anxiety?
I'll be responsible adult right now, and I'll say the thing that is the most important to know. If you feel that you can't help yourself and you can't get out of it by yourself, you absolutely need professional help. And I know that sometimes we are afraid to acknowledge that or and go and look for it because it seems like it seals the fate. But like they say, if you break your leg, you don't hope that it heals, you put a cast on it. So the same
Yes.
with our psychological health. It's not like, your depression is in your head. No, it's not. It's a diagnosis. And as I said, as a responsible adult and a person who has been in personal growth for 20 years, please go to a doctor if you need to. There's nothing wrong about that. It's not because you're broken or something is wrong with you. It's just with some things we need help.
Yeah.
I've caught cold in my life. I've had accidents, sprained my ankles and whatnot. It's normal. Life happens to us. And there is nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with going to a professional and asking for help. And that's, I guess, is the most important thing. If you feel that you can't deal with that, go and ask for help. It's
Yes.
very seldom that a person can pull themselves out of anxiety, out of depression, out of PTSD. It's really very rare. And you really would have to drop everything else in your life and start studying. And self-diagnosis is never a good thing. I think only people who are stranded in Antarctica do their own surgeries to,
Yeah, right.
remove their appendix. Really, we live in civilized world. It's really, you don't need to suffer, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Now, if you've been to the doctors and you are in that process and you're not really giving a diagnosis to yourself, and maybe it's more of a casual anxiety,
Yes, yeah,
not so
generalized
much,
anxiety. Sure.
yeah. In that case, the thing that helped me in the good old days was just the idea that it is one breath at a time, one step at a time, one day at a time,
Mm,
really. Just take it one step at a time.
yes.
These two things helped me from the darkest moment. Being easy on myself and not beating myself up for being miserable. just allowing myself the misery. Okay, I'm miserable. Fine. What do I do next? And
Yeah.
next, I just take one step at a time. And here I'd like to refer you guys to the lyrics of one song because it's brilliant. It's really brilliant. It's a longer poem, so I won't recite it. But it's from Frozen 2, you know, this
Yeah.
animated movie about two sisters. So in Frozen 2, Anna sings a song about, you know, how she's in the darkest hour and just about taking one step. It's brilliant, this lyrics. Just listen to it. It helps. Yeah, I
Thank
think it's
you.
called The Next Best Thing.
Okay. I'll make sure that I have a link to that. I appreciate that very much. Before we head out today, Kristina, I would love for you to just share a little bit about your upcoming book that will be birthed to the world soon called The Art of Being Flawsome.
Thank you. I'll take the chance and share. You know, I actually started writing this book during pandemic, so I call it a pandemic child. And it's been birthed. It hasn't been out of hospital yet because we are in the process of publishing it, but the book is there. And it is literally a book about finding your path back to you. I believe it is incredibly practical, but I also think that in that book, while I'm the writer and I like to call myself a philosopher of everyday life, I actually don't assume the position of a teacher, more a position of a companion, because I believe that transformation happens through curiosity, through asking questions, through
Yes.
through looking for something. And I came to that after 20 years of being in the industry, after learning from so many teachers. But really, the life itself is the teacher. And literally, every single person can become your teacher. You yourself can become the teacher. And similarly, you can be surrounded by the most amazing teachers, people who wish you well, who want to help you so much, and still not live the transformation. And the difference is because transformation happens when the person is ready. That's why I don't believe in forcing people through transformation. And you really do it to yourself. You can have all the knowledge out in the world, but the knowledge doesn't help until it becomes an experience and it helps you see the world in a different view, different light. And that's what my book is about. It's a companion. I help people who go through this book ask the questions, you know, find the courage to be honest, find the kindness to accept themselves despite whatever they discover about themselves. So it is really a companion and just a guideline to self-discovery. But I think the journey of people who are going to read this book is going to be their own unique journeys. I know it's probably a very mystical, cryptic way of explaining what the book is about, but in more simple terms, it's about self-love and self-acceptance.
Yes. Yes. And more of that, please. I look forward to reading your book. And to all of our listeners, if you're interested in learning more about Kristina and you want to get on the wait list for her new book, you can do that. It's not available for sale yet, but you can get on the wait list at kristinamand.com/book, and I'll make sure that I have that information for you in the show notes as well.
Yes, thank you so much for allowing me to promote my book.
Oh my gosh, of course. Of course, with everything that you've brought forward, all you've shared, your talks, your own vulnerability, just the way that you show up in the world. It's been an honor to share time with you, and this book is going to help so many.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for giving me the chance to share my message with the world. It has been a pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure's been all of ours. That's for sure. Thank you so much, Kristina. And again, if you want to get on Kristina's wait list for the Art of Being Flawsome, you can do so at kristinamand.com/book.